Introduce the trap of toxic relationships. Have you ever noticed how a toxic relationship feels like quicksand? At first, it seems harmless. You step in a little, telling yourself you're safe, that you can always step out when you want. But before you know it, you're sinking, the ground pulling you deeper, your chest tightening as you fight for air. And the more you struggle, the faster it drags you down. That is what attachment disguised as love does. We all know the logic. If someone hurts me, I should leave. But love, or what we mistake for love, doesn't operate on logic. It operates on fear, memory, and hope. That's why people who are strong, intelligent, even wise in every other part of their lives can find themselves chained to someone who tears them apart. The Buddha once said that holding on to things not meant for us is like grasping a burning coal. It only scorches the hand that refuses to let go. Yet millions of us keep clutching that coal, telling ourselves the pain is worth it, that maybe tomorrow it will stop burning. But deep down, you already know the truth. You know this isn't love, it's a prison built of fear and longing. You know your nights are sleepless, your body tense, your joy slipping through your fingers. And still, you stay. Why? Because you confuse your grip for love, because you fall in love with illusions instead of reality, because you fear the silence of an empty room more than the shouting of a broken one, and because you're caught in patterns that repeat like storms you never asked for but somehow always return. This isn't weakness. It's a trap nearly every human heart can fall into. But the Buddha's wisdom offers a way out. By seeing clearly, by letting go. Not because letting go is easy, but because holding on is killing you slowly. In this video, we're going to tear back the veil and look directly at the 4 reasons you can't let go of a toxic relationship. It may be uncomfortable, it may sting, but clarity is the beginning of freedom, and freedom is what you deserve. So stay with me. Don't turn away. Because if you've been waiting for a sign to finally loosen your grip, to finally step out of the quicksand, this might be it. Reason 1, you confuse attachment with love. Confusing attachment with love is how a toxic relationship convinces you to stay. Love, when it's healthy, feels like an exhale. You settle into yourself, your shoulders drop, your voice is easy. Attachment feels like a held breath. You scan their mood as if it were weather. You rehearse every text before you hit send. You measure the room for signs you're safe. What you're protecting isn't love. It's a fragile bargain. If I keep everything perfectly controlled, maybe I won't be left. That bargain makes you smaller, not closer. Love expands the edges of your life. Attachment fences them in. You can hear the difference in your own body. After a loving conversation, you feel steady, almost bright, the way morning light warms a kitchen table. After an attached exchange, you feel buzzy and depleted, like you've had too much coffee on an empty stomach. Love is a steady flame. Attachment is a flicker you shield with both hands. The harder you cup it, the more you smother it. Nature keeps illustrating this. Tie a garden vine too tight to the stake and it bruises. Give it a loose loop and it climbs on its own. Squeeze a red balloon and it pops, but hold the string lightly and it floats. Try to pinch a snowflake and it vanishes. Let it rest on your sleeve and you can admire its pattern for a moment. Love behaves that way. The less you clutch, the more beauty you can actually witness. Clutching turns the relationship into a project to manage rather than a person to meet. Attachment also blurs honesty. You start translating every moment into proof. A late reply becomes an emergency. A warm afternoon becomes a promise. A quiet day becomes a threat. You're no longer listening to the person in front of you. You're listening to the fear inside you. That fear pushes you to overgive, to over-explain, to overlook. You call it devotion, but devotion without mutual care is just erosion of your boundaries, your energy, your sense of self. Real love doesn't require you to vanish to keep it. It asks you to show up as you are, and it meets you there. From a gentle, Buddhist-leaning view, letting go is how you return love to its natural form. Spacious, kind, free. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop gripping. It means you trade the tight fist for an open stance. I will care for you and I will care for me, and neither of us has to be owned to be loved. In practice, that looks ordinary. You stop checking the phone like a lifeline. You stop negotiating with every red flag. You start noticing how your nervous laugh quiets when you're not performing for approval. Space appears, and with it, clarity. If you want a small test that rarely lies, pay attention to what you feel after time together. Do you walk away more yourself or less? Do you feel like a room with windows open, or like a room with the shades pulled down at noon? If every goodbye sends you into a scramble, rewriting what you said, planning how to be more palatable next time, you're carrying the weight of attachment. Love shouldn't make you study for the exam of being enough. Another way to see it is to watch water. Cup it gently and you can drink. Slam your hand down and it slips out between your fingers. The relationship that needs constant pressure to exist is already leaking away. Letting go here is not a dramatic exit. It's a quiet decision to stop using pressure as glue. You allow what is sturdy to stay because it wants to, and what is flimsy to leave because it must. That's how a toxic relationship loses its hold. Not through a single heroic moment, but through a series of small refusals to clutch. If you're unsure where you stand, step outside for a minute and feel the breeze on your face. Notice how it moves around you without being captured. That's what love is like at its best. Present, enlivening, free to come and free to go. Ask yourself without judgment, am I here because this love helps me grow or because I'm afraid of losing it? Let the answer be simple. Let it be honest. And let that honesty be the first act of letting go. Reason 2, you believe in illusions. What keeps many people locked inside a toxic relationship isn't the reality of the person they are with, but the story they've built around them. The mind whispers, they'll change. Things will get better. If I just hold on a little longer, the love I dream of will finally arrive. That story feels safer than admitting the truth, so you cling to it even when it hurts. It's a lot like mistaking the reflection of the stars in a lake for the stars themselves. You lean toward the water, convinced you're reaching for light, but what you're chasing is only shimmer on the surface. Illusions look bright, but they can never warm you. In relationships, illusions often take the shape of potential. You remember the one weekend when they were sweet, the rare moment they apologized, or the promises they made after a fight. You take those fragments and weave them into a picture of who they could be. But love based on potential is like building a house on fog. You can't live in it, no matter how beautiful it looks in your mind. I think of Matthew, who stayed with his girlfriend even after years of broken trust. She would disappear for days, return with excuses, and offer small bursts of affection that felt like oxygen to him. He held on, not because of who she really was, but because of who he believed she might become. He was in love with a version of her that existed only in his imagination. The real person beside him was different, and facing that truth was too painful. So he chose the illusion until it drained him dry. Nature offers a gentle reminder here. Imagine a tree in autumn. Its leaves blaze gold and red before falling. If you stood beneath it and begged the leaves to stay green, you would suffer. Seasons change because that is their nature. People are no different. Waiting for someone to become someone they are not is like begging autumn leaves not to fall. You are fighting reality, and reality always wins. From a more mindful perspective, freedom begins the moment you see clearly. The Buddha often emphasized that clarity is compassion, to love someone as they truly are, even if that means admitting they cannot give you the love you need, is a more honest love than clinging to an illusion. Letting go here doesn't mean you failed. It means you chose the truth over a dream that was never meant to last. Try this. Write down 3 promises your partner has made in the last year. Then write whether they were fulfilled or broken. Look at the list and ask yourself, if nothing changes, am I willing to live with this 5 years from now? That simple question cuts through illusion like sunlight through mist. Because in the end, illusions are heavy to carry. They weigh on your shoulders, keeping you bent toward a future that never arrives. Letting go lifts that weight. It doesn't erase the love you once hoped for, but it does free your hands to welcome the love that actually exists. Love that doesn't hide behind promises, but shows up here and now. Reason 3, you're afraid of being alone. For many people, the heaviest chain in a toxic relationship isn't love or even hope, it's the fear of being alone. That fear whispers at night when the house is quiet. What if no one else comes? What if this is as good as it gets? And so, instead of facing solitude, you choose to stay even if the relationship is hurting you. But being alone is not the same as being empty. Solitude can feel frightening at first, but in truth, it is often the soil where healing begins. Think of a winter field. From a distance, it looks barren, lifeless, forgotten. Yet beneath the frost, the ground is resting, gathering strength, preparing for spring. The stillness is not punishment, it's renewal. When you're stuck in a toxic bond, you often trade peace for presence. You accept criticism, neglect, or coldness because the thought of an empty chair feels worse than cruel words. But loneliness doesn't come from the absence of another. It comes from the absence of connection, even with yourself. Sitting across from someone who makes you feel unseen is lonelier than sitting at a table alone. I knew a man, David, who stayed in a relationship long after it had turned sour. He once admitted, "I'd rather hear her anger than hear nothing at all." What he didn't realize was that silence itself could become a friend. When he finally stepped away, the first evening alone startled him with its quiet, but slowly that quiet softened. He noticed the hum of the refrigerator, the rhythm of his own breath, the steady calm of a space where he didn't have to brace for the next explosion. The loneliness he feared had disguised itself as peace. Nature teaches this truth everywhere. The ocean tide pulls away and the beach seems deserted, but only then do shells and starfish appear. A tree sheds its leaves, and suddenly you can see the shape of its strong branches. Space reveals what fullness hides. In the same way, letting go of a toxic partner may feel like loss at first, but that very emptiness is what allows you to see yourself clearly again. From a mindful perspective, the fear of being alone is simply the fear of meeting your own heart. But when you dare to sit with yourself, without distraction, without apology, you discover you are not empty at all. You are spacious enough to rest, to breathe, to invite a love that does not diminish you. Try this. Spend 10 minutes each evening with no phone, no TV, no noise, just you and your breath. At first, the minutes will crawl, the silence will feel like a wall pressing in, but give it time. You may begin to notice that the silence is not against you, it is with you. And in that discovery, loneliness loses its grip. Because in truth, It is better to walk alone on a clear path than to walk beside someone who leads you in circles. Letting go of fear is how you step out of those circles and back into your own life. Reason 4, you're stuck in old patterns. Sometimes the hardest part of a toxic relationship isn't the person in front of you. It's the echo of the past inside you. Without realizing it, we repeat old patterns. We are drawn to what feels familiar, even when familiar is painful. That's why so many people leave one harmful relationship only to find themselves in another that looks strikingly similar. It's like walking the same trail every day. Even if the path is rocky and overgrown, your feet follow it automatically because it's the one you know. Choosing a new trail feels uncertain, even if it's smoother and safer. In love, the mind does the same thing. It pulls you back to what's known, not what's healthy. Consider Rachel. She grew up in a home where affection was scarce, where silence spoke louder than kindness. Years later, she found herself choosing partners who withheld love, partners who made her feel like she had to earn every smile. On the surface, it didn't make sense, but to her heart, the pattern felt familiar, almost comfortable. She wasn't in love, she was repeating a story written long ago. Nature shows us this loop too. Watch a river carve its way through stone. Over time, it makes a deep groove, and the water keeps flowing the same way century after century. Our habits in love are like those grooves. We keep pouring ourselves into the same channels, even when they lead us somewhere we don't want to go. Letting go means daring to redirect the current, to step out of the carved canyon and allow the water to find new ground. Breaking these patterns begins with awareness. You have to pause and ask, what about this relationship feels strangely familiar? Maybe it's the way they ignore you when you need support. Maybe it's the sharp tone that takes you back to childhood arguments. Maybe it's the constant feeling of not being enough. Once you see the echo, you can stop mistaking it for destiny. From a gentle, mindful view, your past doesn't have to be your prison. Patterns lose their grip the moment you shine light on them. Awareness is like opening a window in a dark room. The shadows don't disappear all at once, but you finally see what's been there all along. Here's a practice. Take a piece of paper and write down the qualities of your last 2 or 3 relationships. Circle the ones that repeat. Those are your patterns. Then ask yourself, do these patterns serve the life I want to live? If the answer is no, then letting go is not just about leaving a person. It's about leaving behind the cycle that brought you there. Because love should not feel like reruns of old pain. Love should feel like new air in your lungs, like walking into sunlight after years indoors. The moment you recognize the loop, you've already taken the first step out of it. And that step is the beginning of real freedom. Conclusion: letting go is not the end. If you've listened this far, I want you to pause for a moment and take a breath. Really, close your eyes if you can and breathe. Because talking about toxic love isn't easy. Facing it inside your own heart is even harder. We've walked through the 4 reasons it feels impossible to let go. Mistaking attachment for love, clinging to illusions, fearing solitude, and repeating old patterns. None of these mean you are weak. They mean you are human. They mean your heart has been trying, sometimes in painful ways, to protect you, to hold on to what it believes is love. But here's the truth. Love was never meant to feel like walking on broken glass. Love was never meant to shrink you. Love was never meant to demand your silence in exchange for scraps of affection. Love, in its true form, is freedom. It's the gentle presence that allows you to be fully yourself and still be embraced. Letting go doesn't erase the memories. It doesn't mean what you felt was fake. It simply means you've chosen to stop carrying something that is cutting into your hands. It means you finally believe that your peace matters, that your voice matters, that you matter. And when you let go, you discover something beautiful. The silence you feared is not empty. It is space. Space for healing, space for joy, space for a love that doesn't have to be begged for. So if your heart is tired, if your spirit has been whispering enough, let this be your permission. You are allowed to release what hurts you. You are allowed to walk away from chains and toward freedom. And if these words have touched something inside you, I'd love to hear from you. Share your story in the comments, not just for yourself, but because your courage may be the very thing someone else needs to hear tonight. If you want to keep walking this path of letting go, self-discovery, and inner peace, subscribe to Infinite Buddhist Teachings. This is a space where we learn, week by week, to loosen the grip of fear and step into the light of freedom together. Remember this, letting go isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new one where your heart finally gets to rest and your life finally gets to breathe.